African Continental Free Trade Area (AFCFTA) is one of Africa's key development frameworks aimed at accelerating intra-African trade and strengthening the continent's position in the global market through a common voice and policy space in international trade negotiations. In 2020, Nigeria's Federal Executive Council approved the ratification of the AfTAC agreement. Of the two phases of protocols covering trade in goods, trade in services, dispute settlement, investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy, African heads of state and government have adopted 7 of the 8 annexes. Where is Nigeria in this ever-changing landscape, and how can the country build investment-ready and economically resilient African enterprises under AfTAC? These are some of the issues examined by experts at this forum.
In April last year, with the authorization of Mr. President, Nigeria gazetted the provisional schedule of tariff concessions. What this means is that the preferential rates under the AFCFTA can now apply for trading goods. Those rates come down to a zero-sum game in terms of tariffs, and they have been applicable since April of last year. Also, from a policy standpoint, Nigeria submitted the schedule of specific commitments for trading services.
There are 4 pending protocols, under AfTA framework that Nigeria has signed but is yet to ratify. And these are the protocols on investment, competition policy, women and youth in trade, and intellectual property rights.
Another concern raised by legal practitioners is the need to address a culture that undermines the rule of law, while exploring opportunities for stronger alliances and partnerships that can support trade and investment across the continent.
It's about the institutions, whether it is the courts, whether it's about the law enforcement, the customs, the standard organizations. How do the institutions function? And institutions are not just they are not abstract. Institutions are the way things are done. You can look at institutions as culture.
We can begin to build alliances across Africa with other law firms, other professional services.
Experts at this event believe shifting the needle will depend largely on how well the private sector embraces the enormous opportunities presented by AfTA, while government continues to create a more enabling environment for businesses to thrive.
Ignored the AU protocol on free movement of persons and services, right of residence and establishment, and only 4 countries have ratified it. Nigeria is yet to ratify it. So, how can you address the problem of cross-border trader? When you've not ratified, that particular protocol, and it becomes, in itself, a point of a strategic need.
We have opened an air cargo corridor to Uganda, into the East African market, Rwanda, from Rwanda into the South African market, and we're currently in talks with Air Algiers and Air Morocco, Royal Air Morocco, to penetrate the corridor in the northern region of Africa. And like I mentioned earlier, what the operators tell us is that it has reduced their cost by 50 to 75%.
The expectation is that by December 31st, 2026, there will be a conclusion of the ratification process. This, stakeholders say, could pave the way for a more visible actualization of AfTA and, by extension, greater economic growth and opportunities for Nigeria. Joshua Murakinyo, LTV News, Lagos.